Hello and welcome. I'm Fahd Husain. What a day to be alive. News coming in that the Strait of Hormuz has been opened. Iran has gone ahead and announced it. The President of the United States has thanked Iran and is now firing off posts after post about this huge development. Of course, seems like he's in a very happy mood. He should be. In fact, all of us should be, because whatever has happened means that some sort of an agreement has been reached upon, and the people central to this agreement are Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir, which means that Pakistan has actually done it. We have negotiated world peace. Now, that may sound a bit exaggerated to some people, but I don't think that at this stage where we are, this is far from the truth. If it were not for Pakistan, the world would have seen one of the most terrible conflicts in recent history. So, congratulations to everyone, and especially to Pakistan. Of course, there's much more that will need to happen for the agreement to come into force. But at this stage, I think it is safe to say that the breakthrough that everybody was waiting for has actually happened. And as a result of that, the ceasefire, most likely, which was about to expire in a couple of days, will now hold. We will see some sort of an agreement being signed in Pakistan. There are now, brighter chances, and there are also prospects that very important people are going to be coming to Pakistan. Now, how this happened? Just some time back, the Irani foreign minister fired off a tweet in which he said, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by the Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This was the big news which informed the world that some agreement clearly had taken place, as a result of which Iran was ready to forego the biggest leverage that it had in this conflict. Immediately after that, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, issued a post in which he said, Iran has just announced that the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you. And then immediately afterwards, he sent another post in which he said, the Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for full passage, but the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran only until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete. The process should go very quickly, in that most of the points are already negotiated. That is again a clear indication that things are almost final. Then he fired off another tweet which talked about the Lebanon ceasefire, and he said that Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. After that, again, another one in which he says Iran has agreed to never close the Strait of Hormuz. It will no longer be used as a weapon against the world. And then after that, he said that Iran, with the help of the USA, has removed or is removing all sea mines. And finally, the one that is, of course, the most important to us, President of the United States signed off on this tweet saying, thank you to Pakistan and its great Prime Minister and Field Marshal, two fantastic people. So there you have it, a conflict which raged for nearly 2 months, which destroyed world peace and brought us to the brink of a huge catastrophe, now seems to be winding down thanks to the efforts of Pakistan. We will, of course, talk much about this in today's program. We are now joined today by a guest who has been following this very closely and whose analysis is being read and heard with deep interest all over the world. Mr. Dr. Trita Parsi is my guest today. He is the co-founder and executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He has also written extensively on nuclear negotiations, sanctions, and strategic dynamics shaping Iran's relationship with the West. And he is also a frequent guest on international media platforms like CNN, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, and others. Dr. Parsi, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, this crucial state that we are in today, how hopeful are you that things are actually coming together?
I mean, there's a lot of positive signs that things are coming together for an agreement, but I would nevertheless have a bit of modest expectations at most, because if it is true that the two sides are looking towards what would appear to be more of a grand bargain, which would be a very smart thing for both of them to do, to essentially put almost all of their issues on the table, get a framework agreement on how to resolve them, and then quickly seek that framework agreement after the initial agreement has been signed. That's a very positive step. However, we should be very much aware that from the Israeli side, that is the absolute worst outcome. It's bad enough from the Israeli standpoint that Donald Trump has signed a ceasefire and is no longer bombing Iran. It is even worse if he signs an agreement, comes to terms with Iran, ends the enmity, and most importantly, lifts sanctions on Iran. From the Israeli standpoint of wanting to keep Iran as weak as possible in the long term, sanctions are essential. And lifting those sanctions will be something that the Israelis, as a result, will strongly oppose. And the question is, will Trump be willing to take that fight with the Israeli Prime Minister, who will do everything he can to either stop this agreement or to sabotage it?
Can he act as the spoiler at this stage?
He certainly can. He has in the past. We should keep in mind that Netanyahu and the Israeli government have opposed every diplomatic initiative between the United States and Iran since the 1990s. And they have worked extensively to undermine each and every one of them. And even when agreements have been signed, such as the JCPOA, the Israelis were ultimately successful in scuttling those and sabotaging those as well. Netanyahu is on record saying that he is the reason as to why Trump ultimately decided to walk out of the JCPOA. So I think that particularly if there's a framework agreement and then 60 days followed by additional negotiations to come to a final agreement, that gives the Israelis 60 very days to sabotage the talks.
And if anybody can stop Israelis from sabotaging this, it is the Americans, it is President Trump. Having invested so much in this war, and now if he can bring it to an end and still not be too bruised and battered because of it, you don't think that he could, in so many words, make sure that Israel does not get to do what it really might be itching to do?
He is the president of the United States. He absolutely has the ability, the power to be able to tell the Israelis that they cannot stand in the way of U.S. national interests. The question is he willing to pay the political cost of stopping the Israelis? As you know, some of his biggest donors are people like Miriam Edelson, very, very strong supporters of Israel. They're on record of saying that Israel is their only issue, essentially. So, and he needs them for the midterm elections. He needs them for many different reasons. And this will be a significant challenge for him. But there should be no doubt whatsoever that if the United States decides that this is something that is crucial for it and that he wants this agreement, it absolutely has the ability to say no to Israel. The question is if it is willing to pay the cost for it.
But isn't that cost diminishing because there's a very clear swing within American public opinion when it comes to Israel? In fact, it's been pretty dramatic, the kind of numbers that we are seeing.
The numbers are shockingly dramatic, and perhaps not shocking at the end of the day when you recognize that Israel has been conducting a genocide, that Israel has been dragging the United States in unnecessary wars, and that you have a generation of Americans who are going to be living at a lower standard of living than their parents because of these unnecessary wars in which Israel has played a critical role, not in all of them, but in many of them. And so it's not surprising necessarily. What is surprising is how fast it is happening, and the fact that it is happening even faster on the Republican side than it is currently doing on the Democratic side. The support among young evangelical Christians who are supposed to have a theological commitment to the Jewish state has plummeted 50% in just 3 years. So yes, that will change a lot of things, but it will not necessarily be present in the next year or next 2 years. I think in 5 years, it certainly will be present. So while it is a changing landscape, it may not be changing fast enough for Trump.
Very quickly, Dr. Parsi, coming to the negotiations, if we are to somehow have some kind of a framework where there is an understanding and then finer details are worked out over the next 60 days, as you said, that agreement will, of course, be built in many ways on what was agreed upon in Geneva. Now, you have been saying that right now Iran is actually in a better position than it was in Geneva to strike a good bargain. So what do you think Iran could actually get which would be better than what was on the table in Geneva in February?
I think there's a couple of things the Iranians can get now that they did not get in Geneva and probably could not have asked for in Geneva. First of all, is massive sanctions relief. It appears to me that the Iranians are not backing away from the formula in Geneva, in which they would give a lot of nuclear concessions to the United States. What they're doing is that they're asking for far more sanctions relief, in fact, total sanctions relief in return. And in a way, the Iranians this is a smart move by them. They are in the best possible position in the last 47 years to strike a big deal with the United States. And it is much better in those circumstances to actually put a lot on the table and try to get a big agreement, a framework agreement, a grand bargain if possible, rather than going and trying to change all things in this relationship. This is an opportunity to actually end this enmity, transform this relationship, and do it on terms that are much more favorable to Iran than they would have been 10 years ago. At the same time, the Iranians have more to lose by not having an agreement, because the key things they want, such as sanctions relief, have not been secured yet and can only be secured through an agreement. Trump, however, has already secured the most important thing he wants, which is to just get out of this war, which was a disaster and he should not have started in the first place. Even if he walks away and there is no deal, he is still outside of that war. So he's already achieved his main objective.
And if he's already achieved his main objective, and he can and he won't have to pay a very steep political cost, I'm sure that there will be some cost, because this was a war which hasn't turned out the way that he expected it to do so. So there will be a cost, but what you're saying is that that is a cost that he can bear, and the Iranians now have to make sure that they do not lose this moment which is upon them.
Exactly. Trump will pay a cost for this, undoubtedly, but it is nothing compared to what the cost would have been had the war continued. And it would have led to further escalation, destruction of oil, infrastructure, making sure that there's a production problem, not just a bottleneck problem. If you had ground troops, which would have led to a large number of American soldiers getting killed, he has managed to evade all of those problems by securing this ceasefire. And he can walk away. I don't think he should. I think there's a much better deal for him to get. But bottom line, he can walk away because he has managed to get the key thing he wants. The Iranians have not. They got a ceasefire, but that was not their key objective. Their key objective was to really transform this relationship and get the sanctions lifted. For that, they need an agreement.
And for that agreement to actually happen, I think the way that we are looking at it, Dr. Parsi, is that Pakistan's Field Marshal Asim Munir is in Tehran. He's been talking to the key people there. Probably, and he's the only negotiator right now. Even the White House has said that the president would want to negotiate through the Pakistanis. So he's there, he's spoken to everybody. And I think if there were any disagreements between what one side or the other side within the Iran power hierarchy was thinking, perhaps through this visit, he can now come and speak with the Americans and say, this is what the Americans are saying. So his visit being there at this high level, could you think be the final thing that we are looking for in terms of getting the agreement done?
Certainly. He was not there for vacation. He was there because he is laying the groundwork for another summit in Islamabad that hopefully will finalize the details and there will be a framework agreement. That should be a cause for celebration. That would certainly raise Pakistan's diplomatic standing globally. It will be a point of pride, undoubtedly, but it's also very important to recognize the framework agreement means nothing unless there is a final agreement. And those 60 days between the framework and the final are going to be crucial days, very sensitive days, and an era in which the Israelis will do everything they can to sabotage it.
And in these 60 days, so Dr. Parsi, the way that I look at it, Pakistan's role in the first stage was to essentially get the two sides over here, have them sit across a table. That was done. Now, after the first round of Islamabad talks, the role has in a way expanded because now we are essentially negotiating between the two the countries and of course the prime ministers in Gulf, so Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, we were trying to bring everybody together. If the next agreement is done, then the next 60 days that you're talking about, where all the details have to be worked out, do you see a major role for Pakistan in that phase also?
Absolutely. The role of Pakistan will frankly intensify during certain parts of that framework, those final negotiations. Obviously, what Pakistan will be able to do here is that by getting the framework agreement, there should be able to be a much more smooth and direct working process between the Iranians and the Americans. But even if that happens, you still need a mediator. You still need the type of support that can be provided by a third party. And incidentally, the Pakistanis are very much benefiting from the experience of other countries who have played this role in the past, the Qataris, the Omanis, and others. But they're taking it over the finishing line, partly because of the fact that the United States messed up Geneva. Trump should have taken the deal that the Omanis had negotiated. It was a good deal. Instead, he chose war. It turned out to be a disaster. He couldn't turn back to the Omanis for their support, so he turned to Pakistan, and Pakistan, to the sigh of relief of most of the world, have managed to step up and play this role.
And as you say, this role will continue. I just want to quickly now take you to what could happen next. If everything works out, and of course, everybody is hoping that it does, and this conflict comes to an end, this whole region is going to be completely different, Dr. Parsi. The dynamics will change, the power equations will change. In that scenario, how do you see the entire Gulf, Middle East geostrategic landscape changing, the role of Israel, sanctions lifted, so Iran getting integrated into the economy, and of course Pakistan, which was always confined to South Asia, now playing a role in West Asia and the Gulf. So after the conflict is ended, how do you see this region emerging? In what shape?
So first of all, your point is absolutely correct. If the United States and Iran essentially end their enmity, and I know that is a very, very optimistic take, but let's just play that out for a second. You actually have a full-scale agreement between the two sides. Doesn't mean that they're going to be best friends, but it means that no longer will America's policy and strategy in the Middle East be centered around the idea of containing, confronting, isolating, sanctioning Iran. If that changes, you're going to also see that the GCC states will be left in no position but to also seek their own integration with Iran, despite the fact that there is a lot of anger from both sides. The GCC states are very upset about having been struck. The Iranians are very upset because of the bases that were there, but also because of evidence they say they have that some of the GCC states actually allowed attacks on Iran to take place from their territory and from their airspace. Nevertheless, they have to get over that because they're neighbors. They cannot change the geography, and the option of trying to contain and isolate Iran will essentially be non-existent if the U.S. is not on board any longer. So if the U.S. is moving towards integration, trade with Iran, so will everyone else. That will ultimately be very, very good for the region as a whole, because it enables us to go down a path for collective, inclusive security, a new security architecture in the region that has not existed for the past decades, which is not based on half of the region trying to contain the other half of the region, organizing half of the region against the other half of the region, but actually an inclusive approach in which everyone should be part of the security architecture rather than be excluded, contained, sanctions, etc. Ultimately, that will also have to include Israel, because Israel too cannot be wished away. But if this first couple of steps can be taken, I think there can be a stage that is reached in which Israel can be included, but the ticket price for Israel has to be Palestinian self-determination, statehood, whatever the Palestinians decide that they want to manifest their self-determination in.
You mentioned something very interesting, a turn of phrase, which I want to repeat to our viewers. In one interview, you said that you don't want Israel to become another Iran. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that for the last 50 years, the U.S. has pursued a strategy in the region, and much of the region have been on board with that, which is to essentially organize the entire region against Iran. So we saw that, for instance, in the Abraham Accords. It claimed to be a peace deal. Of course, it was nothing about that, but it was really about creating an overt Arab-Sunni-Israeli alliance against Iran. It was presented as if it was something new, but it was actually something very old, because back in the 1990s, the US pursued a strategy called dual containment. Then the idea was to organize the entire region against Iran and Iraq, dual containment. These two countries should be contained. And then in the 2000s, Iraq was taken out, so the focus was only on Iran. So for the last 50 years, the entire organizing principle has been in some variation to just organize the entire region against one country. It would not, and we've seen the outcome of that. It's war, it's conflict, it's tensions. If the same is done with Israel ultimately, then I think we will have the same result. It will not bring about peace. What we should do is, if the entire region can now unite, integrate, is to also to then pursue a deal that ensures the Palestinians finally get their state. But that means not the destruction of Israel, but that there will also be an Israeli state, rather than thinking that the best outcome can come from just repeating the same failed strategy with Iran, but now implemented on Israel.
And finally, Dr. Parsi, if this agreement does in fact materialize, the efforts of everyone concerned, especially Pakistan, bear fruit, and there is another round here in Islamabad, and an agreement is signed. Looking at the politics of the agreement and how it's going to be spun by everybody concerned, do you foresee President Donald Trump coming to Islamabad, as he mentioned, and actually taking ownership of this? And do you also see top-level people coming from Iran and perhaps from other Gulf countries? What do you foresee?
If a framework agreement is signed, there is a chance that this could happen. Now, from Trump's end, he would come anytime. He loves these type of big summits. He loves the photo op. He loves to bask in the glory of having made some sort of a deal. So he is not the challenge here. He'll come. The challenge is whether the Iranians will come. And for the framework agreement, perhaps they will be more comfortable having a handshake or a photo op between J.D. Vance and Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament. But for a final agreement, I think it would be crucial for the Iranians to also come, be on the same stage with Donald Trump, making sure that both sides really get the ownership of this. I think that one of the biggest mistakes the Iranians committed was that before all of this, they refused to talk directly to Trump. They have had a long-standing position of not engaging directly with the American president. But I think that if they had done that, there is a likelihood that we would have had a completely different outcome and evaded this disastrous war in the first place. Because what happened when the Iranians refused to talk to him is that all he heard, all the headspace was taken up by Bibi Netanyahu and his allies in Washington, D.C., that were constantly pushing him in the direction of war. If the Iranians had agreed to talk to him directly, instead of doing it indirectly through mediators, etc., I think there is a likelihood that this entire episode could have been evaded.
Dr. Trita Parsi, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and we hope to see you again on our show.
Thank you.